About to send the meeting live.
Good evening, members, officers, visitors and members of the public. I'm Councillor Tim Gibson and I'll be chairing this evening's meeting. The meeting will be recorded and proceedings will be conducted in accordance with the Council's constitution, including procedure rules which are available on the Council's website. There is no planned emergency evacuation drill this evening, and accordingly, if the alarm sounds, it is to be treated as a genuine need to evacuate. There are emergency exits to my right, or through the chamber, along the passageway to my left, as you leave the chamber, and then via the main staircase at the front of the building. Please note, lifts must not be used. The assembly point is on the far side of the car park, and it's important that you remain there and do not return to the building until I have announced that it is safe to do so. If anyone present will need assistance in evacuating and negotiating the stairs, could you please inform me now so we can make necessary arrangements to assist you. Thank you. Just before we proceed with the formal session this evening, I just wanted to take the opportunity to pay tribute to former councillor and Mayor of Swale, Honorary Alderman Colin Prescott. Colin sat as a member of this planning committee for many years and of course served as both vice chairman and chairman. And his sad passing is quite clearly a loss, and we send our best wishes to his wife and family at this sad time. And members, I would thank you if you would stand in a minute's respect. Thank you.
Thank you, members. That is 1 minute.
Thank you, members. This meeting has a quasi-judicial role and determines the rights and obligations of the applicant. Members must consider each application and everything that is said in the meeting concerning the application and make their decision based solely on their planning judgment of the information available to them. Following a decision by members, delegated authority is given to the planning officer to issue the decision notice, and planning permission is not granted or refused until the issue of that decision notice. Any member of the council who is not a member of the planning committee may attend as a visiting member and may speak having given prior notification. Such visiting members may of course include ward members, and whilst visiting members can speak on an application, they are not permitted to vote. Any member acting as a substitute on the planning committee must have undertaken appropriate training before doing so. Members must remain in a meeting for the whole time that each item is debated and should not vote on that item unless they have done so. I would now like to welcome our public speakers and remind you that you have 3 minutes to speak, and an audible warning of time will be given when there are 30 seconds remaining. If the meeting is deferred to conduct a site meeting, you may speak both at this meeting and at the site meeting, but there will be no further opportunity to speak on the matter when it comes back to the planning committee. The meeting will follow the order set out in the agenda. However, I'll amend the order if there's good reason for doing so. And in particular, I'll take items where a member of the public is registered to speak first, before moving on to the remainder of the agenda, and I'll verbally reorder the agenda as appropriate. Members, now take item 1, which is apologies for absence, and any substitutes, please.
Thank you, Chairman. There are no apologies. Thank you.
Item 2, which is to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of January 2022, minute numbers 532 to 536 as a correct record. Members, all in favour? Thank you. Item 3, I invite you to give your declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests under the Localism Act, if we have any, and disclosable non-pecuniary interests. Thank you, members. We now move on to the main business end, which is item 4, to consider the attached head of planning report, parts 2 and 5. I will commence with item 2.1. And this one is 21/501/08/REM, and it's the Slips, Scockles Road, Minster, Kent, ME12 3SN. And I now thank the officer to introduce the item and give us any updates. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. It's Paul Gregory here. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear, Mr. Gregory. Thank you.
Perfect. I'll just share the screen firstly, and then I'll move on to the updates and a short introduction to the application. I'll do the updates just as the screen is loading, because they don't really affect what members can see. So firstly, since drafting the report, I've received an amended floor plan from the applicant which relates to one of the house types, and all this does is simply swaps the location of the WC and a storage cupboard on the ground floor, and has no impact at all on the external elevations. As such, the proposed amendment in my view is very minor, is acceptable, and doesn't alter any of the considerations in the report. The second update is that the reason stated for imposing condition 13 is incorrect and should in fact read "in the interests of visual amenities," but that's the only 2 updates. My screen should be coming through shortly if it hasn't already.
Thank you. Mr. Gregory, if I could just ask you to hold there for a second, please.
Yeah, of course.
It's got a minor technical issue.
Okay.
Okay, members, can I ask you then to just view the screen behind me? In the public gallery, are you able to see the screen? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Gregory, I'll let you continue. Thank you.
Thanks, no problem. So as the chairman introduced at the start, this is a reserve matters application for 62 dwellings, and the site already benefits from planning permission for 62 dwellings, so it's in accordance with the parameters of the planning permission. As part of that planning permission, the 2 access points coming off Scockles Road, shown here and here, are already approved, so members aren't considering that this evening. In terms of the application itself, which is for the reserve matters being landscaping, layout, appearance and scale, we've got 62 dwellings on the site, which in my view are laid out in good planning principles in terms of providing the development in perimeter blocks with outward facing dwellings. In terms of the elevations themselves, here are some street elevations. So the top one being the one that would front onto Scockles Road. Elevation B, which is along the southern, close to the southern boundary of the site, and then we've got elevation C there, which is on the western side, sorry, on the eastern side of the site. I think the house types, which we've worked with the applicant to uplift the quality of, and I think what we've got now is a high quality design, and I think sit well on this site overall. The other points to note from the layout are that there is a retained hedgerow which runs along Elm Lane and also on the eastern side of the site as well. There's a public footpath which runs through the site and connects into Drake Avenue to the north. That's being retained, and as part of the planning permission there is a contribution to upgrade that footpath, and also as part of the planning permission there is some off-site highway works included which provide footpaths along Scockles Road, move the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, so they increase the length of that, so it starts roughly with the junction with Elm Lane and provides some widening along Scockles Road along the site frontage as well. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Councillor Dolly White, please, to speak on this item? Parish Councillor Dolly White.
She seems to be having technical troubles. She just messaged me. Doesn't seem to have an option to speak on Teams at the moment. So whether Billy wants to read out her statement instead. Hopefully she'll be on for the other 2 items.
Yeah, Mr. Otway, could you read out the statement for us, please?
I don't think we received Dolly, Councillor White's statement.
I guess you're saying you can't. Thank you.
No. I could try and help her get into the meeting another way.
Yeah, we'll just give her a minute.
She is trying your direct line, Billy.
Mr. Atway, are you having any success?
Not as of yet, unfortunately.
Okay. I think unfortunately we're going to need to proceed. Okay, thank you. So I move the officer recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Jace. Right, as the A ward member, would you wish to speak first on this? As a committee member, of course.
Happy to, Chair. I think this is on a wholly unsuitable road. Currently isn't wide enough for 2 vehicles to pass safely, especially at school run time with the large number of buses taking pupils off the island. I know medical facilities would have been discussed last time, but obviously we have none. Looking at policy A21 of the last local plan or the current local plan, it says to consider widening Scockles Road frontage across this site. Doesn't appear to be much of that going on. It says consider a portion of plots for self-build. When the outline application was put in, there was a number of self-build properties along the south side, and I think that may have sold it to previous committee members. It may not have done, but I think it's a shame that we haven't got that option to self-build. I know there's a lot of people on the island that are crying out for self-build plots and are struggling and are having to move out of the borough. I think obviously we know from the island healthcare is a massive issue. We've just had 9,000 patients dispersed across the island and Iwade. The footpaths aren't wide enough to get up to the village. I don't know why this is being proposed to get to the shops, get to the schools. The footpaths aren't wide enough. They don't meet current standards. Some of them aren't even 30 centimetres wide, or you've got to keep crisscrossing across the road to walk up this road safely. I do think this is wholly inadequate location. I know that this is no longer at outline and we're at reserved matters, but I think the people of Minster have been failed by the previous committee that approved this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, members. Councillor Winkler.
Well, thank you, Chair. Can the officer put a visual photograph up of the actual Scoles Road and the road that's that the ward councillor was referring to just now, please?
Yeah, I've got a few photographs of that. This is the southern end of the site. Here's the site here with the advertising board essentially that you can see there in red and white. That's where the site begins, and then this is from Harps Avenue, so looking south, and the site is essentially where my cursor is there. I do have a further photograph which shows the central part of the site as well. If you bear with me a second, they're a bit erratic in terms of how quickly they load. That's not the best one, sorry. Yeah, there you go. So this is the site lies behind this plant in here. So that's basically those 3 photographs show the section of Scockles Road nearest to this site. It's worth pointing out that this is a reserved matters application. We're not considering the impact on Scockles Road, which is to be widened as a result of the planning permission that's been granted.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory.
Okay, thanks for that. Thank you.
Members, anybody else before we go to the vote? Okay, those in favour? Those against? And abstentions? So members, that is carried. Permission is granted subject to the issue of the decision notice. 11 for, 5 against and 1 abstention.
Chairman, sorry, it's Paul Gregory speaking. Can I just confirm that's with delegation to approve that drawing number, which swaps the WC in the storage cupboard, and the amend the reason for imposing condition 13?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So members, we now move on to item 2.2, which is 20/505921/out. And I've got Councillor Dolly White again, but have we still got the same issues? Right, thank you. Councillor White, can you hear me?
I can, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, loud and clear.
I just wanted to apologise to members. I'm so sorry. I've been sent the wrong link. I got the public feed rather than the meeting feed. I'm so sorry about that. Can I just check this is the Highfield Road application?
This is indeed, yes.
Lovely, thank you. If you can hear me, is it okay to carry on?
Yeah, just 1 second. We haven't had the outline yet, or the.
I do apologise. Sorry about that.
No, it's not your fault. That's my fault entirely. Thank you. I'll thank the officer for an update, please, and an outline of this one. Thank you.
Hi there, it's Elizabeth Jump here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, loud and clear.
I'm just going to share my screen with you. If you just bear with me 1 second. Can you see the presentation okay?
Yes, thank you.
So the application seeks outline consent for a maximum of 16 units, and just by way of an update, there is an additional contribution that KCC have sought for £183.67 per dwelling, which the applicant has agreed to, and it's recommended that if consent is granted, that also be included within the Section 106 agreement. So further to the update, just to provide an overview of the site. So the application site is located on Highfield Road. It sits to the south of the properties shown here and forms the site boundary as outlined here in red. And you can also see that in the site layout plan here. So the application site is located outside of the settlement boundary, which is outlined here in red, and the site access here is this road here, and this outline in green shows the important countryside gap, which again the application site falls within. So under policy, it's traditionally policy directs refusal of schemes in such locations, but in these circumstances it is considered that the site is within a sustainable location, within walking distance of local amenities and within reasonable public transport links to further facilities. It's also noted that there again is an appeal decision for Bartlett's Close, which is shown here, which is pertinent to this site, for a very similar scheme, also for outline consent for 17 units in that case, which the inspector also considered both the impacts of the development in terms of being outside the settlement boundary and in terms of the countryside gap, and considered those to be acceptable. And it is similar circumstances that are present in this scheme, and for similar reasons that this application is recommended for approval. So here I provided a couple of images to show this is Highfield Road, to give a sense of the existing development that's present. These images show the existing access points, which will encompass this existing access, as well as widening with the adjacent property to create the access down to the application site. Highfield Road is located on quite a steep hill, with the application site being towards the top of the site, and these images provide an illustration of that. These images show you some further context for the application site itself. So this is the access point when you come off of Highfield Road, the location of the what will become a proposed orchard if consented. Some images to the north of the site where you can see the existing properties on Highfield Road and some of the landscaping within the existing site. There are a number of existing, there are a couple of built form within the site which will be removed if consent is granted, and the images show some of the conditions that currently exist on site, and this image shows the existing context with the neighbouring boundaries, which, as you can see at the moment, they are quite exposed. So as mentioned, it's outline consent for a maximum of 16 units. The image on the left shows the parameter plan, which shows the location of the access point, some additional screen planting to sit behind those properties to improve the amenity provision and safeguard the residential amenity of these properties, and then shows the restrictions on height that change and vary within the site context, varying 1.5 to 2 stories throughout. There are certain restrictions on the location of development with a southern water easement and the drainage and attenuation features. To the south of the site, approximately half, so 0.7 hectares, shall be provided as open space, with the area shown here in green to just be public open space with the existing landscaping, and then the addition of a community orchard. The image then on the right shows the detailed elements for the access point, and this demarcation here shows that the building frontages will open out onto the open space to the rear.
Okay, thank you. I now thank Parish Councillor Dolly White, please, to speak on this item.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Chair, and good evening, members. My name is Dolly White. I'm Vice Chair of Planning and Transportation at Minster Parish Council. I'm here tonight not to make a recommendation on this application because it's not in our parish. We're not official consultees, but we do consider it close enough to be able to make some observations on some aspects of the development and how they might relate to the wider issues frequently arising in increasing number of housing applications coming forward in the Minster area. This specific site is not a large one compared to some, but the housing density is still very high and hardly in keeping with the surrounding area in terms of visual and residential amenity. We note that local residents flag up what they see as an unsafe access design, opening up onto the crest of a steep hill and increasingly used as a rat run for traffic trying to avoid congestion and tailbacks at halfway traffic lights. But our concern is more to do with the site's location outside of the development area on land currently designated as countryside, as it seems inevitable that this proposal will involve a loss of an eco-friendly environment and destruction of long-established wildlife habitats, which will be, in our experience, not replaced in the area at all. So they will lose that completely. And despite the developer's apparently generous provision of green space, it's questionable whether this will compensate for the loss of real countryside or eventually constitute anything other than a simple amenity area of the estate. Other issues of a wider concern, such as the inability of the island's already overstretched infrastructure, including education, elderly care, policing, public transport, and a whole host of other struggling services, to cope with the sheer number of similar applications, mostly on greenfield sites. We don't contend that this particular application will have a big impact on that, but in combination, they are increasingly a big threat for the quality of life on Sheppey. And we'd like to specifically look at the focus on the halfway traffic lights, because this area is just about to have a new primary added to that area, and the congestion around there is already intolerable for all residents and for everybody trying to get on and off the island, as it's one of the major routes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Simon Brasher, please, to speak on this item?
Hello. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear, Mr. Brasher. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak on this. I did raised an objection similar to the Mr. White that was speaking before, and mine's based around the loss of the countryside gap and the natural habitat in the area. The countryside gaps, I see them, are important areas set aside to create that natural barrier to support wildlife between areas of development and to stop the urban sprawl. And although this is only a small development, it is a vital piece of countryside that will maintain the barriers between potential development areas, especially to the south, where Barton Hill and the lower road areas, which I believe there is planning applications in for them. This and other countryside gaps, of course, are set aside for a reason and should not be given up just because of the lack of identified housing land supply in the local authorities area, and regardless of the pressures that are placed on the authorities by developers wanting to develop these areas. Once these areas are handed over for development, they're lost forever, and in most cases the wildlife doesn't return to a manufactured area of their habitat. I feel that the planning committee and local authorities should be doing all they can to support and protect these countryside gaps, as this will ensure a better balance between the land development and nature. And this will also help conserve the vital natural habitats for our wildlife. This is why they were set up in the first place, and they shouldn't be ignored just because of a lack of identified building land in this development area. There's also the other concern, which is around the junction with Highfield Road and its proximity to the brow of the hill. Although there is a speed limit of 20 miles per hour, this has not been enforced and vehicles regularly travel in excess of this. For the vehicles turning left from the proposed development, which is up towards the top of the hill, especially large vehicles, they will be crossing into oncoming traffic who will be unsighted until they reach the brow of the hill. And this could mean a decision and braking distance of less than 50 metres, making it a potential accident hotspot. And of course, now further consideration could be given to look into the Minster traffic lights, where they want to turn, I think it's the Crescent into one way with its access onto the Minster Road junction there. This will create a rat run through Highfield Road of people trying to miss those traffic lights. And at the moment, it's bad enough at peak times, but to have it through the day, especially on that particular road, on Highfield Road, I consider it to be a potential for a real accident black spot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brasher. Your time is up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I now invite James Delafield, please, to speak on this item?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear, Mr. Delafield. Thank you.
Good evening, members. My name is James Delafield, and I'm the planning agent for the application. Thank you for providing me with the opportunity to address you this evening to support the application on behalf of our client, New Homes and Land. The application before you seeks outline planning permission for up to 16 dwellings, with all matters reserved apart from access. Your officer's report sets out a rigorous and thorough assessment of the application on its planning merits. The conclusions reached and the recommendation to approve are soundly based on technical evidence that supports the planning application, and the further agreements reached in relation to appropriate mitigation measures which are addressed through the proposed conditions. The application provides an opportunity to deliver an additional 16 dwellings in a sustainable location, as acknowledged by a planning inspector on the recent Bartlett's Close appeal decision, which is appended to your officer's report. Significantly, the application is to be determined in accordance with the presumption in favour of sustainable development in the context of a 5-year housing land supply shortfall, and the recently published housing delivery test results, which will see the council now having to add a 20% buffer to its housing requirement. The fragile housing land supply situation in Swale increases the importance of permitting residential development on small-sized windfill sites such as this, in line with paragraph 69 of the NPPF. The other benefits arising from the development may be summarised as follows. Provision of an area of public open space, approximately half the site, which would incorporate a community orchard and an area for informal play. Jobs during the construction phase and additional expenditure of future occupiers, which would support local shops and services. Sustainable construction methods and features, including the provision of electric vehicle charging for all dwellings, and measures to achieve a significant net gain in biodiversity beyond 10%, and a commitment to deliver this in advance of the Environment Act requirements becoming mandatory in November 2023. Notably, the proposal delivers more planning benefits than those offered in the Bartlett's Close application, which was approved on appeal. Therefore, there are strong material considerations supporting the grant of permission, and I would ask the Planning Committee to take them fully into account in making a decision. While small in scale, we recognise that the proposal has caused some concern to existing residents on Highfield Road. We hope that those who have reviewed your officer's report are comforted by the work that has been undertaken by the applicant in liaison with officers to deliver a scheme which seeks to mitigate its impacts. Several of the concerns raised by neighbours are matters which relate to the detailed design, and these will of course need to be duly considered and addressed through the reserved matters application. This Planning Committee will have the opportunity to consider the application in due course if minded to approve. Once again, thank you for your time, and we hope that you will be in a position to approve the application in line with your officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now move the officer recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Jace. And members, asked, you've got Councillor Beard, Councillor Marchington. Does one of you wish to speak? Yeah, no, I'm talking about first on it. Yeah. Okay, right. Councillor Beard, you can speak first and second then.
Thank you, Chairman. There's been a lot of comparison between this and Bartlett's Close by the officer, the objectors, and the applicant, or the agent, sorry, for various, I would imagine, different reasons. I understand what the officer has set out in 7.15 and 7.16. However, I do think this is extremely different to Bartlett's Close. Bartlett's Close is quite low-lying at the end of a cul-de-sac. This is putting an entranceway in between some houses and building extremely close to a crest of a hill, which has the risk of being seen from quite some distance away. Now, as this is only outline, the plan that we've been given is only indicative, and we're looking at the fact that the houses are actually set back quite a way into the site. But of course, at the moment, we're only looking at the outline application with everything reserved other than access. So moving on to access, it was alluded to by Mr. Brasher that obviously at the moment, KCC are looking at a scheme where at the halfway traffic lights, they are going to reduce it from a 4-arm junction to a 3-arm junction and make the fourth arm one way, so you can only come out, you can't go, sorry, you can only come in, you can't go out. There's two ways to look at this, and I think I noticed that Mr. Millard was on the call, so hopefully he'll be able to comment from KCC Highways. That scheme has gone out to consultation and has received significant objection and is likely going to have to go to the JTB, and the JTB are going to have to decide it. If it's approved, as Mr. Brasher alluded to, if it's approved, more traffic will come over Highfield Road. Because naturally, people who live in Southdown and Adelaide won't be able to go the route they used to go, so they'll now go up over Highfield if they want to continue on to Minster. So I don't think it'll be a huge increase in traffic, but there will be an increase in traffic. On the flip side to that, if it's not approved, I'm pretty sure it's accepted widely that that junction is currently over capacity. Now, if that scheme doesn't go ahead, and the whole reason that scheme is being planned is to add capacity to the 3 arms that will remain flowing, if that doesn't go ahead, we're then putting more houses onto a junction that we've already admitted is over capacity. And I had this issue when we discussed Bartlett's Close, and I had this issue when we discussed Admiral's Walk. So that is a major concern for me. in terms of the access into the site, if you turn left out of here, you're going straight up to the brow of the hill. If you're turning right, the hill goes down and bears to the left in quite a steep curve to take you down to Admiral's Walk. KCC have removed this route from their gritting route recently. I have that in writing from the district manager last year. This road is not necessarily passable unless you've got a very good 4x4 in the winter. The hint's in the name, Highfield Road, it goes over the top of a brow of a hill. There's also been a mention of the fact that the Countryside Gap, there was mention of the fact that the school's next door. It is, but even with the school there now and when it was Minster College before, there is an established tree line between this site and the school, and it is a thick tree line. If you stand on the school field, you cannot see what's on the other side. So I do think this is an important Countryside Gap. Something that is mentioned in the report but wasn't really mentioned by any of the speakers as well is that bit of land there to the left of the site is the South Down Reservoir. And I know Southern Water have had extensive dialogue on this, but it does concern me about how close this development is to an underground reservoir that's on the top of the hill there. So I do have outstanding concerns. In terms of access, as much as it normally pains me, I'm quite tempted to suggest a site visit because I think members who might not know this road might benefit from coming and having a look at where this access is going to be and what you will see as you're coming in and out of it. So I will propose that if I can get a seconder.
Members, you've heard the proposal duly seconded. Those in favour of a site visit? Sorry, did you want to speak to it?
Can we either get a comment from Mr. Millard now, or if he agrees to come to the site visit, we can discuss it then?
Okay. Mr. Millard, could we have a comment, or would you prefer to wait until the site visit, if we have a site visit, of course?
I can talk now, Chairman, if you'd like me to.
Yes, please. Thank you.
I mean, in terms of the access position, it isn't particularly close to the brow of the hill in terms of geometry and stop-in sight distances that were mentioned by the speaker earlier on. I think the access is around 50, 60 metres from the brow of the hill, and with the speed of Highfield Road, the stop-in distance, the sight lines for an access there, at 30 mile an hour, we're looking at 43 metres. So it's in excess of the stop-in distance for 30, and 20 mile an hour was mentioned as well, and the stop-in distance for that is only 25. So we're well clear of the brow of the hill. The geometry of the access itself is typical of the surrounding roads and accesses onto, say, for instance, Adelaide Gardens, the other side, west of Highfield Road. The junction onto there are comparable in size. So it is a typical junction into a residential estate, and I mean that's what you would see on site if you look there. It would look like all the other junctions.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, could you comment on the traffic lights at the halfway junction, Mr. Miller, at this juncture?
Oh yes, sorry, Chairman. Yes, the halfway traffic lights junction are is a scheme that's triggered by the development of Belgrave Road. It's also required by the Barton Hill Drive development. Now the works there, as Councillor Biertz has mentioned, a traffic regulation order has been advertised for part of those works, which was the one-way system, but that will be reported to JTB at the end of this month for members to consider. The works through there, the improvement works with doing that. It's it's estimated that it gives the traffic lights the capacity to bring around 300 vehicles per hour extra through that junction. So you can see what sort of improvement to flows along Queenborough Road and Minster Road that would achieve through Halfway. So it is beneficial. If the works do not go ahead, the impact from the Highfield Road development, that only generates around 8 vehicle movements an hour in the peak. That's arrivals and split between arrivals and departures, which would also dissipate east and west of Highfield Road, depending where they're going. So the impact at Halfway traffic lights themselves would be very, very minimal. So there wouldn't be any reason to refuse the application for the impact on Halfway traffic lights, given the size of this development of only 8 vehicle generated movements during the AM and PM peak hours. Thanks, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So members, come back to the formal proposal for a site meeting. Those in favour? Thank you. Those against? Abstentions? So that's 10 for, 3 against and 3 abstentions. So members, we'll arrange a site meeting, which I'll let you know about before the end of this evening. Thank you very much. That's deferred for a site meeting. We're going to skip past 2-3 members, as we've got no speakers on that one, and move on to item 2-4, please, which we do have a speaker on. And this one is item 21/505878/full, and it's Danedale Stables, Chequers Road, Minster-on-Sea, Sheerness, Kent. And I thank the officer for an outline and an update, please. Mr. Byrne, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. There is no update for this application, and I'll just quickly run through the application and the history to this. So the land currently comprises a small stable building, as can be seen in the photo, and an otherwise open field associated with the stable. And there is some fairly mature landscaping along the site frontage here, which you can see here from the Google Maps image, which is here. The site itself is on the it's within the countryside. It's this site here. It sits just outside the built confines to Minster, and this site here is a allocated housing site which is currently under construction at the moment for 9 dwellings, and the dwellings are essentially built. You'll see that in the photograph in a minute. This site here to the rear of the allocated site, that has permission which was granted on appeal for 5 dwellings as well. If I go back to the photos, so members can see the new housing development that's taking place here. And members may recall, and we'll see from the report, that the application site was subject to a previous application for 5 2-storey dwellings, and that was refused by the planning committee in 2020, and that was refused on the grounds that despite the lack of a 5-year housing supply, the location, design and impact of the development would be harmful to the countryside location and setting, and the plan that members can see now is the plan of the scheme that was refused and dismissed on appeal. And during the course of the appeal, the applicant had submitted the current application, which, as members can see there, is again for 5 units, but this time for 5 bungalows. Now, the appeal decision has been very recently received, and as I say, that's been dismissed, and members will see that the decision in full is reported under section 5 of the agenda. And the key points from the inspector's decision were that the site is well located in terms of its access to services and facilities, being immediately on the edge of the existing settlement of Minster and is in a sustainable location. That development would be seen against a backdrop of existing built form and would appear part of the linear development along Chequers Road. However, the inspector was critical of the size and scale of the proposed dwellings, and in addition, they were concerned about the relationship with the neighbouring development that's taking place, which you can see from this street scene drawing here. These 3 units here on the right hand side are the development under construction on the adjacent site, and then there was quite an abrupt rise in height to the 2-storey dwellings on the application site because of the change in topography. So under the current application, the fact that the application has been amended to bungalows has quite significantly reduced the scale and height of the development. The height has been reduced by between 2.3 and 3 metres, and the relationship with the neighbouring development is now far less abrupt. The provision of bungalows would assist in providing different house types and choice, and the drawings indicate as well that the units would be wheelchair friendly and accessible. As the council is still in the position that it cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing supply, officers consider that the harm caused by the development and identified by the inspector has been reduced and is now limited, and that this harm does not significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the development. So on that basis, we consider that the current scheme for bungalows essentially has overcome the criticisms in the appeal decision and are recommending that this application is approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne. Could I now invite Parish Councillor Dolly White, please, to speak on this item?
Thank you, Chair. I won't worry about reintroducing myself if that's okay. The proposal is contrary to Swale Borough Council's policy ST3, the Swale Settlement Strategy, which aims to protect the character of the surrounding countryside and maintain the separation of existing settlements. The site is set in open countryside outside the designated built-up area boundary. Minster-on-Sea Parish Council is adamant that this open land should be retained as such. If the development is allowed, the area becomes a pure ribbon development. Furthermore, the Parish Council is not impressed by the applicant's so-called pragmatic approach to tree conservation, and similarly unimpressed with the view that the impact on the proposal will affect the coastal marine protected area. This can be mitigated by a cash contribution. Put simply, there is insufficient community infrastructure in the rural locality to warrant this development. One example is the lack of footpath provision, which can be seen from Google Earth. Additional concerns include the risk to any archaeology on site. We'd have to absolutely disagree as well with the planning officer on one element, that none of the amenities in Minster will be accessible for wheelchair users unless they have a car. So that area really requires a site visit, because from the conversation so far, I can easily tell that this area is not understood by the people planning to develop on it. The road that this development is proposed upon has a speed watch group that operates in that area, and is one of the highest places for speeding in Minster, therefore supported by the Speedwatch group. It has a speeding camera just 10 or 20 metres up the road from it. It has no footpath provision, and the footpath that is available into Minster is on the wrong side of the road, with no footpath provision on this side of the road. And to get up to Minster Village on foot or via a wheelchair you would have to climb a very steep hill with the access being very unlikely to accommodate a wheelchair at all. And it's surprising that hasn't been picked up by officers with this application. The original application, which was mentioned previously, had a site visit attached to it. But as you can see by this application, it's demonstrably changed. So we would like to highlight another site visit to make sure that what you're proposing is understood in context to the application and its natural environment. For instance, you haven't understood the road, you haven't understood the traffic nature in the area, and you haven't understood that none of the amenities in Minster will be met or be able to be looked at by these residents unless they have a car.
So that's your time is up.
Sorry, thank you, Chair.
That's okay, you're welcome. Thank you very much. Members, I move the officer recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Jays. And as this is in your parish again, then I'll allow you to go first, should you wish.
Thank you, Chair. I think the appeal decision is something that we need to look at on this one. On section 17 of the appeal decision, it says that if the planning inspector was to make a decision, he'd expect an appropriate assessment for this scheme to be made. So I just want to check that that has been made. Firstly, sorry, page 207.
Yeah, the inspector's referring to the appropriate assessment in relation to the impact of new residential development on the various SPAs within the borough, which is obviously quite a common occurrence whenever we deal with new housing developments. And if members look on page 128 of the agenda, they'll see that there is an appropriate assessment there, which essentially concludes that with mitigation, which is our established SAMS financial tariff, that any adverse impacts can be suitably mitigated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the plan decision that I think is relevant is it says, when it talks about the tilted balance, it says that the scale of this site does not make a massive difference to our numbers. So I don't think the officers should be putting such pressure on that as they did previously when it's come before us and we rejected it. I think a lot of what we said before still stands. I do think looking at the footprint of them houses, it is too big for that site. It will affect the semi-rural character of Minster. All that seems to happen at the moment in Minster and a lot of the island is developers come along to where horses are being grazed and steal their site, and then the horses move on somewhere else, and then lo and behold, developers a few years later come and chase them off. So the rural character, the semi-rural character of Minster is constantly being changed and eroded by planning. And I still think a lot of what we said last time we refused this should still stand. And I do think as we're going to visit Councillor Beardswald in halfway, I think I'd quite happily like to see us visit this again. I think we're looking at something different to what it was last time, so I'd like to formally propose a site visit, please, Chair.
Thank you, members. You've heard that proposal. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Darby, thank you. Members, those in favour of a site visit? Oh, yes, you can. Apologies.
It was only, what, a year ago that we went and visited this site. I understand that we're looking at a different application, but the site as it stands hasn't changed. And any members in this room who attended that site visit know what they're going to go and look at. I don't think it's worth a site visit on this one, but I'll leave it to members. But those members who were there, you're going to look at the exact same site. Nothing has changed.
Councillor Dender, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I totally concur with Councillor Burt. I was there at the site visit and we looked around a heck of a lot. We went even into the adjoining site to have a look, if you recall. And I really don't think there's anything to be achieved in going and look at the same field yet again. I remember the views, I remember the road, I remember the road traffic. So no, I wouldn't say site visit.
Yeah, thank you. Members, anybody else? Okay, we'll put that one to the vote for a site visit then. Those in favour? And those against? Abstentions? That's 15 for and 2 against. Thank you. Apologies, 15 against. I'm not going to beg for another site meeting, I can assure you. Thank you. Yeah, so we're back to the substantive motion on the floor. Councillor Winkler, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as I say, I did attend the first site visit, so I'm well abreast with the ground we're talking about. But getting to this application, I touch on what the ward councillor said. I don't think there's been any change, basically. I mean, the developers come back and suggested 5 bungalows, but I still think this site is not suitable for these bungalows. And something else I said at the first meeting on this, I'm very concerned about the road, the right-hand turn going into the road, if it's passed and the road is sloping and the speed of traffic. So I'm afraid I cannot go with this revised proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dender, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have to disagree, I'm afraid. I don't particularly like the development. I don't particularly like where it is, but when you look at the appeal very carefully, and I refer to paragraph 8 on the appeal, referring to Councillor Dolly White's comments, these policies are intended to ensure housing is located in the areas which are accessible and sustainable. However, these policies do not prevent the development of land outside of settlement boundaries, provided that the landscape character and appearance of the rural area is protected or enhanced. We've seen the officers show that the level of the roofs is now below the adjoining settlement, and the appeal makes quite clear that all other items have been cleared. So she is saying everything else is okay. It was the 2-storey appearance of the buildings that were stopping it going through. We were totally within our rights when at the site, and I remember later, to reject it on the basis of the bulk of those buildings. But I really do feel we risk another appeal if we reject this one.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt, please.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I agree with what's just been said there with regards to the appeal, and especially with bungalows now, we do need bungalows, and it's something that we've said. I think it may have even been said at the past committee about bungalows on this site. I do just want to pick up on the being in the countryside, and it's something that's come up already before this one tonight, and it's probably going to come up again, and it will probably come up at every meeting that we have coming up, because there is a lot of applications now coming forward just outside of the built up boundary. And whilst I can see that they are sites that nobody is really going to want because it's outside and they don't think it should be there, it is sites that we are not in a position to be able to fight. We haven't got a 5-year supply. The local plan has gone back, I would say delayed by 2 years. We're not in a position to be able to fight these, and we need to start realising as a committee that we're going to have to make decisions that we don't like and other people aren't going to like. And it is going to be these sorts of sites that come forward that have to be approved. Even though it is only 5, we have won appeals where we've got 1 dwelling or 2 dwellings that have been refused and gone to appeal, and the applicants have lost. But we've had many others as well that have come forward and been approved out in the countryside. So 5 does add up and helps with our numbers. These are the sort of things that we do need to start approving, unfortunately. And the officers have got it completely right. We've got nowhere else to go with this one.
Thank you. Councillor Beard, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Kind of following on from Councillor Dendor's point when he mentioned paragraph 8 in the appeal decision, I would go on to 9 to 14. Some of the things that the inspector has picked out there I actually think highlight issues here. The site appears part of open countryside which extends beyond the appeal site. The site provides a visual separation between the existing built development and contributes to the open rural nature which is experienced beyond the appeal site. Therefore, there would be a degree of urbanisation and countryside encroachment through additional housing. He doesn't say the 5 houses, although that's what they're alluding to, but any development here would have a level of impact. They go on to say that the landscape quality is medium rather than low medium and is a pleasant landscape with few detractors, and that development of the site would result in the infilling of the existing gap between 189 Chequers Road and the development under construction, which would then appear part of the linear development which extends along Chequers Road, and the proposal would then become prominent when viewed from Chequers Road. So I do think there are still issues about the terms of, is the site acceptable for housing? However, I would say almost to applaud the applicant, because many of the points that were made at the refusal of the last one, I think they have picked up. There was mentions of bungalows and the need for bungalows. There was a mention of, oh, these are 5-storey, you'll be able to see them from Rodmersham because it's so high up that site. But actually, these bungalows will sit with the hill behind them. So I think the applicant has taken that on board. A question of clarity. On the last one, we had a lot of debate about the footpaths and the fact that originally you were supposed to cross the road, to then get back to then cross the road again. And they put in a revised drawing that showed the footpath that would connect to the existing footpath that's just been built. Is that included in this scheme?
Yes, it is. On the plan you can see on the screen, if you see here amongst the canopy of the trees, there is a footpath link that takes you down and connects to the development next door.
Yeah, so I think actually that when the parish councillor made a point, and I think actually that kind of resolves that point, because that was the point we made last time, and they've obviously taken that on board. So I'm between a rock and a hard place of, is this acceptable as a principled, is it acceptable for development? But actually this is a superior development to the one that we looked at last time and couldn't be refused on the same reasons for refusal. The issues with filling in the gap, and we were told we couldn't call it a countryside gap because it's not designated as such, but for all intents and purposes, it's a gap in the countryside. But I don't know if that one reason for refusal would stand up in an appeal. So I'm really not sure how to go on this one, but I know there was quite a few other people wanting to speak, so I'll wait and see what's said.
Thank you. I do share your views about highways, and I can remember in particular Councillor Hall on the site visit being particularly vociferous about his concerns about the highway and the interlinking of the routes. But I've got Councillor Bonney waiting to come in, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I spoke extensively at the last one and the deliberations. To my mind, if we could just flick between the current proposal and the old one in terms of those floor prints. So, and then flag. So if I look at those and flick between those, they look pretty identical in terms of mass of footprint. So I know the height's been reduced, but actually if you look at the gaps between the buildings, they look like you can just get, you know, they're wafer thin. So those roof to roof, especially those two on the middle to right hand side of a screen that we can see in front of us. I've seen the appeal notice and the inspector's comments, and actually I'm kind of heartened by it because it talks about the appearance of the rural areas protected and enhanced. Does this development protect and enhance the rural character? I can't say that it is. Okay, so it's bungalows. but it's still development, and that takes away from the rural nature. I think what the planning inspector says about the tilted balance, it quite clearly says it makes a limited contribution, so we can throw that out the window, and I think that is significant. We put in place policies to look after our countryside and protect them from development and what is defined as the built up area. And I think policy ST3, to my mind, is significant, and I take that into account, that is outside the defined built up boundary area, and go back to that comment I've just made about the appearance of the countryside. Is it protected and enhanced? And it is on top of a hill, and you do remember rightly my comment, you can see it from Rodmersham. So okay, it might have a lower roof line, but the visual impact is continuous development of 5 dwellings quite closely packed together in what is effectively at the moment a piece of countryside. So policy ST6 here is also quite clear about the significance and appropriateness of the landscape character and quality. And again, we talked about that last time. And here, if you look at the plots and the footprints of the gardens, and I think we talked about fencing and, you know, gardens, they're not the countryside. It is development. Is it appropriate? And to my mind, it's not. So I think we've got actually, we can use pretty similar arguments for a refusal here. To my mind, lowering the roof a bit doesn't address the overall impact on the countryside and the character. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Martin, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think we have to look very carefully at what has changed. And apart from the height on this particular, we've also had the appeal decision for the land to the south. That, I think, is a material consideration in this case. We're looking now at land which is basically being surrounded by development. How can we stand up at appeal if we were to refuse and say this patch of land is not suitable in principle for development when the land immediately south of it is? When the land immediately south of it that you will see from Rodmersham, just the same as you'll see these bungalows from Rodmersham, that are probably going to be 2 stories rather than single story. It's going to be really, really difficult. I've got great sympathy with the parish councillors and with the members in the area, but frankly, I think we'd be baiting ourselves just to be paying out money to developers for costs for being unreasonable. I think the applicant has clearly listened, they've gone away, they've seen what they can get away with, and this is probably something that they can get away with and we're going to have to accept, unfortunately.
Thank you. Members, I don't see anybody else indicating. So I'll take this one to the vote then. Those in favour of the officer's recommendation? Those against? Abstentions? Okay, so that's 8 for and 8 against. So that falls on my shoulders, and I'll vote for in favour of the officer recommendation. Thank you. Right, members, we now move, and obviously permission is granted subject to the issue of the decision notice. Move on to item 2.5. And this one is 21/502609/ and it's land to the east of Linstead Lane, Linstead, Kent. And I thank the officer please for an outline and any updates.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. I will share my screen. Right, hopefully you can see that. That's an illustrative landscaping plan showing how the development might be built out. The updates as follows. Members will note the tabled update. By way of a brief introduction, the application is in outline with all matters other than access reserved for a development of up to 10 dwellings. The application is considered to be acceptable in principle as the council cannot, as members are aware, currently demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and the site is sustainably located adjoining the built-up area boundary for the village of Tenham. Although the settlement is at tier 4 of the settlement hierarchy, the village has a good level of amenities and a range of public transport facilities, including a mainline railway station. These facilities are within a reasonable walking distance of the site. I am also aware that members have been contacted by Linstead Parish Council, within whose area the development is proposed, about the highway implications, particularly for Linstead Lane. The issues are dealt with fully in the report, and members will note that the development of up to 10 dwellings will generate only limited additional traffic movements, and furthermore, that the scheme will deliver improvements to Linstead Lane. A 1.5 metre wide pavement will be provided between the site and the A2, and a proportionate scheme of traffic calming is proposed to regularise the current situation where park traffic causes intermittent disruption to traffic flow. 3 parking spaces for existing residents' vehicles to use are also proposed within the development. In addition, it's worth pointing out that Alan Millard from KCC Highways is on the call, so can give a further explanation of the highway implications if members so wish. So in conclusion, officers
we've lost you there, Mr. Wilson.
Oh, right. So I assume you still can't hear me.
Are you with us, Mr. Wilson?
Sorry, sorry, can you hear me now?
We've had a member pretending that you've got Wi-Fi in Faversham, so.
So you still can't hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Yes, thank you.
How
we got
much
to
of
the
my
point
update did you hear?
Right, so we got to the point where you mentioned Mr. Millard is on the
Okay.
And that's what we.
Right.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
The good news is I was just saying that Mr. Millard can give technical sort of detail to flesh out what I said about the off-site highway works. And that was really where I was going to conclude, and just reiterate to members that officers are firmly of the view that this is a development that where outline planning permission should be granted, mindful that it would be tightly conditioned, and also that there'd be a Section 106 agreement to secure a package of developer contributions as set out in the report.
That's quite an interesting sloth that appears to be swimming on your screen.
Sorry, did you get all my update?
Yes, yes, thank you.
Apologies for the sloth. I can't do more than one thing. I can't do 2 things simultaneously, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. Right, could I now please then invite Parish Councillor Julian Speed to speak on this item? Okay, Mr. Speed, when you're ready, please.
Thank you. Good evening. We strongly oppose this application, and on the planning portal there are 207 detailed letters from residents, every one of which objects. I've run a poll on local social media groups in Tenham and Linstead. 507 residents voted against, with just 7 in favour, all from one household. The committee shouldn't be approving an application that 99% of local residents reject. The reason for recommendation is lack of housing supply, but this doesn't mean houses should be built in the wrong place. Linstead Lane already suffers from excessive traffic and cannot absorb more. The objection letter from KCC to a proposal for 84 houses on the other side of the lane highlights its inability to handle more traffic. The lane has restricted width, poor alignment, and a substandard junction with the A2 that cannot be widened because of listed buildings on either side. This application should be viewed in conjunction with that 84 home proposal because the cumulative effect of both being approved would be disastrous. The road safety audit was based on one site visit, and the photographs are a serious misrepresentation of the regular bottleneck at the top of Linstead Lane. It only takes 1 or 2 vehicles at the junction to create congestion, especially with HGVs and buses. Emergency vehicles already struggle to get through, and the proposal is actually to narrow the road still further. The priority shuttle system will leave residents with even fewer places to park. The 3 off-road spaces proposed for existing residents are nowhere near enough, so parking will be displaced further south. This would be further away from people's homes, so loss of amenity, and would restrict visibility around the bend in the road there. The site is on higher ground than the existing homes, which means they would be overlooked, so loss of privacy. It fails the test of reasonableness. These 10 homes cannot reasonably be considered in isolation from the stated intention by the developer through the Reg 19 and 18 processes for up to 50 new homes across this plot. As such, it also fails the test of prematurity given the new local plan is still in development. This loss of valuable BMV land will start to infill the important local countryside gap between Tenham and Linstead identified in the council's own report of January last year. NPPF guidance obliges the council when looking at proposals to make sure pollution inputs are reduced. Extra housing in this AQMA5 area will add to traffic pollution. We also believe the application should be refused for not complying with para 17 of the NPPF and policy ST3 of the adopted local plan. Were this application to be approved, we would ask that a binding sterilisation in planning terms be imposed against future developments on the wider plot and prohibition against any future traffic through the plot from other plots. The benefits of a development can be opposed where there are countervailing disbenefits. In conclusion, we urge the committee to reject this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Mrs. Williams, please, to speak on this item?
This is our case against the public walking across our commercial property, rather than taking a route onto Linstead Lane, where there could easily be a pathway. We challenge the right of way and as it's for the original land and may not be valid for any land other than the original land of the vendor identified in the conveyance. Also, the change in the use of the land increases the burden to us, where the use is simply intensified, such as repairs, maintenance and renewals. A private right-of-way is different to a public right-of-way. We lost the business to a fire in November 2018. We as a family and our employees decided to rebuild, and we have been established in Tenham for 50 years. We were given a lot of community support. Planning was given for us to have a building to accommodate the plot as long as it had access for employee parking, customer parking and deliveries having to be taken off the A2. Should our work yard become a public walkway, we'll have to unload on the A2, as our insurance company will not insure us having lorries reversing onto the yard due to unknown pedestrians. This would cause total chaos to the highway, as this takes up to 45 minutes. During work hours, and moving around at all times. We keep stacked timbers, skips, broken glass outside, awaiting recycling, which should be a magnet for with accountable for any injuries occurred. The impact is not an issue. Once the houses are built, the walkway will become available to all general public taking shortcuts, which cannot be managed, therefore uncontrollable. The security is a real issue. Fire destroyed the property and it was reported the start of the fire was inconclusive. This could have been arson. We have also previously had many thefts, therefore now to get insurance we are having to keep the site locked outside of work hours. Should the general public be allowed to walk through our yard, insurance will be unobtainable due to being unable to keep the site safe and locked. The site is too narrow for a fenced walkway to be put in adjoining the A2 pathway, as we'd not be able to access our workshop with our company vehicle. Having lost one business to a fire, we would not be able to withstand in a second. This would push us into receivership. With lack of security and health and safety, we'd have to consider closing the business, making 5 employees and directors out of work. We do not.
No time. Thank you very much. Could I now ask Sam Sykes, please, to speak on this item?
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. This application has been made by Eden Real Estate, a small company operating across the southeast. Eden Real Estate took a proactive approach and undertook pre-application discussions with your planning officers to inform the proposals. Taking your officer's advice, a small development of up to 10 sensitively considered dwellings has been proposed on the site. Set within a sustainable location in the settlement of Tenham, the site has excellent connectivity to local shops, schools, services and the wider bus, road and rail network. The scheme will deliver significant benefits to the provision of family housing through a discreet and sensitively considered approach. The proposed dwellings can be designed sympathetically, respecting local character whilst meeting high sustainability credentials. Planting can be accommodated within the site, particularly on boundaries, to reduce visual impact and retain the rural character of Linstead Lane. The proposed development is considered to result in a low to neutral impact in visual terms once landscaping is established. With regards to pedestrian access, the applicants did not initially include the northeast option as part of their proposals. During the course of the application, Kent County Council officers felt that this access point would be beneficial to deliver the connectivity required to make the scheme acceptable in highway terms, and so it was included. To clarify, this would not be a public right-of-way, but an access for residents only. Neighbours raised concerns with the proposed access during the course of the application, and in response, the applicant proposed a footpath on Linstead Lane, where a severely restricted and substandard footpath currently exists. This new footpath would create a pedestrian link to Tenham, benefiting both existing and future residents. This footpath provision represents a planning gain of some significance and as such must weigh heavily and positively in the planning balance. We would like to stress to members that the applicants have therefore outlined 2 equally acceptable options for pedestrian access, and the choice before members is the option of the northeast corner access or the Linstead Lane access, or indeed both accesses. We believe this demonstrates the flexible approach taken by the applicants in responding to comments from the community, neighbours and officers. We would also add that Kent County Council officers are entirely satisfied with the proposal in highway terms. Your officers have recommended approval and in doing so have noted the multiple benefits of the scheme. There are a few constraints to the site and consultees are of the view that there would not be any adverse impacts. We support your officers' view that the proposals are acceptable in line with the development plan and the NPPF and the presumption in favour of sustainable development. On this basis, we respectfully request that members support the officer recommendation for approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite visiting ward member Lloyd Bowen to speak on this one, please?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, apologies from Councillor Mike Whiten, who was planned to be here this evening but has been called away. And also just the fact that this site that keeps being referred to as tenement, it is not tenement, it is Linstead. But I wish to speak and request that the Planning Committee thoroughly look at the implications that this application has a down to Linham and Maidstone, avoiding the A249, but it is a lane. Tied to a decision that we have to build just because they started it. This application is like an episode of Mastermind. I started and now I've finished. In this immediate area is an AQMA. We will do anything to address this. Access. This proposal is for a new footpath that doesn't exist. From the London Road via a business, as we've heard, like that in all likelihood would shut if this application were to continue. 50 years working in this area. We don't have doctors. Well, sorry, we have doctors overstretched, a school overstretched, bus services not which they used to be in this area. What benefit will come from this? There is sadly nothing about this application that this will benefit the local community. Not even the Section 106 money. There isn't a play area within 5 minutes walk requiring people to cross the A2. If members are in any doubt about how this proposal will affect the area and landscape of a very old area, and at very least I urge you to arrange a site visit to see for yourself. Members, the local parish councils oppose this. Residents oppose this. It is another development in the AQMA area and both ward members oppose this. This must factor in your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And can we just confirm that Councillor Whiting won't be available remotely? Thank you. So members, I move the officer recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Jones, thank you. Councillor Dendor, please.
Thank you, Chair. I know this area quite well. I know the lane very well as well. And I tend to concur with Councillor Bowen's comments. But I would propose for people who don't know the area that a site visit will be very, very beneficial indeed. So I'd like to propose a site visit.
Councillor Weeklis, I'll second that.
Okay, members, do you wish to speak to it? No. Those in favour of a site visit? Yeah. Those against? And abstentions? That's 12 for, none against, and 5 abstentions. So we'll arrange a site visit. Thank you, members. Item deferred then for a future site visit. Can we now move back to item 2.3, please? And this is 21/506426 full. And it's Seafields Caravan Park, First Avenue, Eastchurch, Sheerness, Kent. And I thank the officer for an outline, and if there are any updates, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. There are no updates on this application. This is an application, or another application, I should say, for temporary opening of a holiday park during the months of January and February. Members, I'm sure, will recall that two very similar applications were put to committee last month. This application is for Seafields, which is a relatively small holiday park, contains 13 static caravans within the large holiday park complex to the north of Eastchurch. We have planning policies that resist 12-month occupancy, and we would normally limit opening seasons to a 10-month period, but at the moment, due to the COVID pandemic, the government has issued guidance and a ministerial statement which essentially encourages local authorities to give encouragement to allow these holiday parks to stay open for additional periods. That advice runs to the end of this year, and this planning application seeks permission solely for the opening season to be extended for January, which is obviously passed already, and the rest of this month. And in 2023, it will revert back to the 10-month occupancy condition and permission that historically it has operated under. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne. I move the officer recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Jays, thank you. Members, any comments, questions, observations? Councillor Burt, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Largely my comments from the last two apply to this one, but I do think it's farcical that we're still looking at these when we're now nearly halfway through February, and come the end of the month, it won't matter anyway. It's quite laughable when you look at page 113 and you see this is a very small site surrounded, as Mr. Byrne quite rightly put it, a complex of multiple sites. And they're not one big site. There are multiple sites here that are of similar size to this. They vary. I'm pretty sure this is one of the only ones in that complex that have actually bothered to apply. The rest of them are staying open regardless. This council's doing nothing about it, won't do anything about it. But we are where we are. The cabinet member made this decision off his back to send this letter to invite them to apply. I applaud the ones who did apply and are following the rules, but I'm not shocked that there's a huge amount who haven't bothered. So we are where we are. I will be supporting this begrudgingly. I just hope that we will etch into stone this claim that we will go back to normal in 2023. What this council considers normal, I'm not sure.
Thank you. Councillor Winkles, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I partially agree with the previous speaker. I mean, we're 6 weeks past the 1st of January. It would be ludicrous to go against the officer's recommendations on this when we're in March the 1st in about 3 weeks' time. So I will be back in the officers on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just be clear in my own mind that this only applies to 2022? So talking about reverting in 2023, do we mean reverting during 2023 or from the 1st of January 2023? Can I just be sure in my own mind?
Yes, certainly.
Yes.
The guidance and ministerial advice states that the guidance is effective until the end of 2022. So on the 1st of January 2023, that advice will no longer apply unless, of course, they issue new advice. But as it stands, that is the deadline that is given in the advice.
Thank you. So members put this one to the vote. Those for the officer recommendation. Those against? Abstentions? So 13 for, 3 against and 1 abstention. So that is carried and permission is granted, subject again to the issue of the decision notice. So we now move on to part 5 members, and I look forward to hearing from Councillor Beard, even though he's not signalling yet. So Councillor Simmons, you've spoilt the tradition.
Thank you very much. I've got to find the right piece of paper. I just wanted to say that how pleasing it is that under item 5.8, this has been a ongoing problem in Throwley, and I'm pleased to see that the inspector fully supported the council's action on enforcement. I'm pleased with that. I don't know if it's possible this evening or at some stage with 5.9, which I couldn't quite understand. This is to do with a prior notification which failed. I didn't understand the exactly what the meaning of the appeal decision is. So whether Mr. Jeffers is poised with his finger on the button, as Bamber Gascoigne used to say.
He needs to be invited first. Mr. Jeffers, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I did speak to Mr. Thomas about this one because I was as puzzled as you were, or are, and he is. It's quite a difficult and complex one. It relates, as you rightly say, to prior approval. It's not a planning application, and it's to do with PD rights. And under the appropriate class, which I think this is a PNPA, which is light industrial to dwelling for both the properties, they've got no rights to make any external alterations to the buildings. So they can change the use, but you can't put any new openings into the building, windows, doors, etc. Under other PD rights, you can do that when you change from an agricultural building to a dwelling. But under this, you're not allowed to, and therefore that's why it failed, because it didn't pass the natural light test. In terms of there's no natural light to the buildings, because we can't do it under this, even though I believe planning permission has actually been granted for this. So it's a technicality. It's a technical, yeah, it's a complicated. If you want to know more, then don't speak to me.
Yeah. I was just going to say, don't waste our time. Go and have a quiet word in the corner with somebody somewhere.
Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. That does make sense, because I believe that the building is a former poultry shed and would probably not have any openings as such in it anyway. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hunt, please.
Okay, so I will mention Danedale Stables, because obviously it was a good call by the committee, where officers went against officers. So well done, the committee. I can say it because I was with the officers on it, and I think it should have been approved. But there you go. A good move.
Loser.
Yeah, but I'm happy to admit it. There we go.
And Councillor Burt, please.
Well, I echo the comments on 5.7, and I wasn't going to mention it because we've done it to death on another item this evening. However, I would say well done to the officers. Apart from the poor decision on Baldon Lane, all of these were delegated refusals, and all of them were pretty much turned over. Sorry, apart from Hempstead Lane. But yeah, the rest of them were appeals dismissed. So the officers have got it bang on those.
Thank you. Councillor Bonney, please.
Yeah, so I know we've talked about Namedale, but I think it just shows that actually the power of those policies, that you can use them. I think sometimes the committee has been frightened or bullied into, you know, the tilted balance arguments, and actually I'm encouraged by what the inspector said there about what it would do to the supply. So I don't think we should feel intimidated on smaller sites, and that we should be robust and stick with our policies, that we've spent a lot of time over the years in lots of iterations of local policies. So I think we can use those. And again, I'd say about design, I'll go on and on about it, but if it's poor design, and I have probably different views to many others on design, I do think we should stick to our guns. And actually, what we've ended up with tonight, although I didn't vote for it, is a far better scheme than we got in the first place. And I do think we should not be afraid of turning stuff down on poor design.
I agree. Thank you. Councillor Hunt.
Sorry, while we've got time,
You've
we're
had your go.
discussing it all. Yeah. I mean, while that's been said, I think that we do have to be careful, and I think it's right that we can use these, and we are going to still get away with summons and get them refused. But
Well, I don't think we got away with it, did we?
Well, we did on that one. Just we got the bungalows everyone wants.
It was sound judgment.
But there was a council in Essex yesterday that had refused too many. They've gone over the 10% of large developments and have lost control of their planning because of that. And if we do have larger developments that we do sort of get a bit carried away with and start thinking, even though we haven't got the 5-year supply, we can still refuse things, we do just have to be very careful on these and make sure that we are tight on everything that we do.
Well, we're in Kent with the York and East chairman. Thank you. So members, just finally then, planning working group, 10 a.m. on Tuesday, the 1st of March. So we'll, on the 1st of March. Okay, so we'll start on the Sunny Isle at 10 o'clock. Absolutely, for those Welsh people amongst us. And then we'll ask Cameron, he'll send you a link to the Google Maps. Yeah, that's the second one's Linstead Lane. Sorry. Yes, we're going to do them both on the same day, so. Okay, so Highfield Road, 10 o'clock, and then we'll move on for Linstead, probably travel time. If we say 11:30, I think that'll give us enough time, I hope. 11:45 Linstead, 11:45 just to make sure. Because not everybody comes to say, Paul, that's a trouble. Some can make one, but not the other. Aha. Okay, members, thank you very much for indulgence again this evening, and look forward to seeing you all at the planning working group meeting. Have a safe journey back home, and it's very strange being back in the chair.